Shalom, shalom, Barak Hashem YaHUaH, praise the name of YaHUaH. We are the Nazarene of YaHUaH, and of course, we are doing this recording on a Shabbat Yom or Shabbat day, covenant day between YaHUaH the Most High and of course his people Yisrael, or as some of you would know, the name Israel. We are of course the true called out people of the Most High, who of course would have been enslaved by virtue of our ancestors' disobedience to the instructions or Torah or law of the Most High YaHUaH, which he would have outlined would have happened in Deuteronomy chapter 28, among other scriptures. But we are excited to be doing another lesson today, and each week we are so grateful when you join us and you view our videos and share them and you comment. We believe knowledge should be shared with all. It is not a secret matter. So we're looking at Shaphatim or Judges chapter 6 today, and this chapter of course outlines Yisrael's disobedience, enslavement, and deliverance. Not the first time it is happening, and throughout scripture we see that it was not the last time. In fact, it's happening now. But we will look at this particular chapter and what took place there. Again, we're the Nazarene of YaHUaH. Thank you so much for joining. Please stick around to the end of the video. We are looking at some exciting things and some interesting things and taking some lessons for ourselves as we move forward. Praise the name of YaHUaH. Let's begin. We get into some background leading up to chapter 6. What were some of the things that were happening or happened which went into chapter 6, and of course the chapters that followed thereafter? The Most High YaHUaH gave his people a warning or some warnings, and with every warning he gives consequences. He tells us the consequences. But as usual, because his people are stiff-necked set of people or group of people, we tend to hold on to the promises of the Most High YaHUaH when things are looking bright and peaceful and prosperous. But then after a while his people had the habit or the practice of getting laid back and eventually blending in with the people around them and beginning to absorb and practice their religious practices. We see that happening today, where his people again are still latching on to and absorbing or adopting the practices of the systems and the nations around. So we want to look at chapter 2 and see what warning and consequences YaHUaH would have highlighted to his people, and then we'll progress with other forms of background information. So what was said in chapter 2? We're looking at verses 1 to 3 and 10 to 15. Verses 1 to 3 says, the Malak, or what you know as angel, of YaHUaH went up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I brought you out of Mitzrayim, or as you would know the word to be Egypt. So I brought you out of Mitzrayim, Egypt, and led you into the land I swore to give to your ancestors. I said I will never break my covenant with you, And you shall not make a covenant with the people of this land, but you shall break down their altars. You have disobeyed me. Why have you done this? And I have also said, I will not drive them out before you. They will become traps for you, and their mighty ones will become snares to you. Wow. Let's look at verses 10 to 15. The whole generation also died. A whole generation died out, and a new generation came up. It says, that whole generation also died, and the next generation forgot YaHUaH and what he had done for Israel, for his people. Then the people of Israel transgressed YaHUaH against YaHUaH and began to serve the Baals, or the lords. The word Baals is the Hebrew or Abra's word for Lord. So they began to serve the lords, and this is why we do not call the Most High Lord. If we look in a number of the prefaces of the various translations, you're going to see them telling you that they have literally used some special device to replace the name of the Most High with Lord. And again, the Hebrew word for Lord is Baal, so they have replaced his name for Baal. Right? Anyways, let's continue. Verse 12 of Judges chapter 2. They stopped worshipping YaHUaH, the Elohim of their ancestors, the Almighty One who had brought them out of Mitzrayim, Egypt, and they began to worship other mighty ones, those of the peoples around them, or the nations around them. They bowed down to them and made YaHUaH angry. They stopped worshipping YaHUaH and served the Baals and the Astartes. Verse 14. And so YaHUaH became furious with Israel, or with his Kudashim, his called out people, and let raiders attack and rob them. Consequence, punishment. He let the enemies all around them overpower them, and Israel could no longer protect themselves. Verse 15. Every time they would go into battle, YaHUaH was against them, just as he had said he would be. He warned. They were in great distress. Great distress. So we see that warning taking place in chapter 2. The people, of course, a new generation rose up, like every other generation up until this generation now, that forgot the Most High YaHUaH. And even in this generation now, a number of our people have forgotten who the Most High really is. Some have not been taught about him, and so unfortunately they do not know yet. But as we continue to spread his word and his name, we know there will be an awakening and the dry bones will rise again. Praise YaHUaH. So in chapter 2 we see that took place. Now in chapter 4, Israel defeated Sisera, who was the captain of the host of Canaan, of a mighty army in Canaan. And if you read through that chapter, you'll see just how he died by virtue of a woman called Jael or Jaal. Yael. She would have taken the peg of a tent and drove it through the side of his head and killed him. He was destroyed because, he really tried to escape from the judgment of the Most High, and it caught up with him. So after they defeated Sisera, and this host would have really plagued them for about 20 years. about 20 years. Then in chapter 5, towards the end of chapter 5, of course, they got 40 years of rest. So for the 20 years of oppression that they encountered after they called out unto the Most High and he delivered them from their enemies, at the end of chapter 5, the chapter concludes by informing us that the people of the Most High got 40 years of rest. Then, of course, the cycle continues, moving into chapter 6. So chapter 6 begins with the usual pattern of Israel when they're, delivered and feeling relaxed. They become complacent and lawless, covenant breakers. And so the punishment of YaHUaH was usually the loss of wealth, the loss of possessions, destruction of lives, loss of positions of power, being sold, to other nations and enslaved by other nations. Chapter 6, they again break the covenant of the Most High, move him to anger, and are enslaved again. And it continues over and over and over. The modern form of enslavement today can take the form of our people ending up imprisoned more than any other nation, ending up in warring feuds and gangs, ending up with high mortality rates. Our people continue, as they anger the Most High, to suffer from the consequences. Poverty stricken, lacking food, having wealth of lands and losing them to many other nations, getting jobs that are menial. So our people continue to suffer because of disobedience and moving the Most High to anger, breaking the covenant with him through his Torah, through his laws, through his word, and of course are enslaved again. And this time, according to the chapter, they were enslaved by the Midianites. Now, who were the Midianites? The Midianites were also descendants of Abraham, just as Israel was. But they came through Abraham's third wife, which was Keturah or Keturah. And you can read that in Bereshit or Genesis 25 verses 1 to 2. So this nation of people also came through the loins of Abraham, but they were not the chosen people of the Most High. They were also traders and auctioners of enslaved people. We see an example of this in Bereshit 37 verses 28 and 36, where Yosef or Joseph was sold by his brothers to them. They bought Joseph and they resold him to the Mitzrites or the Egyptians. So they were also merchants, Remember also, it was from among this nation of people before Israel was freed from Egypt. It was from among this nation of people, the Midianites, that Moshe obtained his Achad, or his wife. And you can reference Shamut or Exodus 2 verses 16 to 22. But of course she had to cross over into Torah after, of course, the children of Israel would have been freed and received the laws or instructions of the Most High. So she had to come under that when that was given to the people at Sinai. So there was, of course, another story of a plague that took over Israel in Numbers chapter 25, the first eight verses thereabout. And there was a man who, whilst Israel was crying and seeking the Most High to lift this plague, there was a man who came before Moses and the rest of the people of the Most High, and he went and married a Midianite woman. Now by this time they would have already gotten the instructions of the Most High, and they know they should not have had international marriages or marrying into other nations, marrying with other nations. So this man, by virtue of his action, marrying a Midianite woman, caused the plague to be upon the nation. Of course, the story continues that one of Aaron, the priest, one of his grandsons, got up, took a javelin, ran after this man and his wife, and of course took their lives using the javelin. And we're told in the script, or in the scripture, that the plague was then lifted from the nation. So there's a long history, various other encounters with Midianites, that Israel experienced. But we see that they are now enslaved. Israel is now enslaved under the hands of the Midianites. The children of Israel had to resort to living, in caves. And we're going to see how, this occurred, and of course of the others who would have oppressed them in those times. So we are looking at verses 1 to 6 of Shaphatim, or Judges chapter 2. And it says, Israel did evil in the eyes of YaHUaH, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites. Because the power of Midian was so oppressive, Israel prepared shelters for themselves in mountain clefts and caves and strongholds. Whenever Israel planted crops, Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern people invaded the country. So these YaHUaH's people, they had to resort to caves and other strongholds. They had to leave the prosperity of lush vegetation and lands that were prepared for them by the Most High to go into rocky places and hilly terrains to hide out pretty much and try to make life for themselves again. They tried to do this. Mention was made of the Amalekites, who also joined forces with the Midianites and oppressed the people of the Most High. Who were the Amalekites? They were descendants of Esau, and again descendants of Abraham. They were just like the Midianites, descendants of Abraham, but not the chosen people of the Most High. So these Amalekites would have been descendants from Esau according to Genesis 36 verses 12 and 16, and they were of course, related to the Edomites or associated with the Edomites. The Amalekites were some nomadic type of people. And we also see reference made to them in Numbers 13. They are said to be natives of the Negev desert, which was located between Egypt and Canaan or Canaan. The Babylonians called them Sut or Sute. Egyptians called them Sitiyu. And of course, the Amarna tablets refer to them as the Kabati, or in English, the plunderers. Of course, they, just like the Midianites, had a long history of oppressing Israel. And we can see that in Deuteronomy or Hadabarim 25 verses 17 to 19. So Israel was really supposed to utterly destroy these people. The Amalekites wiped their names off the earth, but they did not do as the Most High would have instructed in its entirety. So these Amalekites joined the Canaanites to attack Israel in Numbers chapter 14, verse 45. They joined Moab against Israel in Judges chapter 3, verse 13. And now, in chapter 6, they've joined the Midianites to plunder Israel's land and food supply. And of course, this nation of people would have, in essence, taken off their ancestor Esau and his profound hatred for his brother Jacob or Jacob, through whom the chosen people Israel came, whose name of course was changed from Jacob to Israel or Israel. But Esau's descendants would have continued in this hatred for the people of Israel. So, of course, the verse continues and tells us that, they would camp or encamp against Israel. They ruined the crops for on masses of land all the way to Gaza. They did not spare anything. Nothing was left. No food, no means of assisting with farming through their donkeys, etc. They left nothing for Israel. Verse 5 says, they came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was virtually impossible to count them and their camels. They invaded the land and ravished it. That's these Amalekites, Midianites, and Eastern people. So it was a number of different people that just came together as a force against the people of the Most High. And of course, Midian caused so much pain on Israel, having them flee in the mountains. They couldn't reap their crops when they planted them. They couldn't benefit from anything. And Israel cried out unto the Most High YaHUaH because of the oppression. Because these other nations, they would destroy their farm produce. They would always wait until harvest time to come and then camp against Israel and wait for the crops to be ready. Then they would go in and take everything. So everything Israel worked so hard to have was stolen. They became like a separated people, which was later referred to as a ghetto, when you look at the traditional meaning of that word, it is of course a separation of Yahudim or Jews. And so they became an impoverished settlement, much like a number of the ghettos today. You know, things have not changed much for the people of the Most High. The cycle continues every time we're disobedient. So, by breaking Yahuwah's covenant, you know, by breaking his laws, it robs us of what we work so hard to gain. We end up working and can't see the fruits of the labor, you know. Having experienced such a long season of humiliation, poverty, and fruitless labor and oppression, Yahuwah's people cry out to him, as is the norm. As is the norm. Now we continue to verses 7 through 10. And it says, when Yisharal cried out to Yahuwah because of Midian, he sent them an ahabah, or as you know in English, a prophet. We're not told who this prophet is or what his name was or her name was, or we're just told that a prophet. And the word of the Most High that came to his people, he said, this is what YaHUaH, the Elohim of Israel says, I brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians, and I delivered you from the hand of all your oppressors. I drove them out before you and gave you their land. I said to you, I am YaHUaH, your Elohim. Do not worship the mighty ones of the Amorites in whose land you live, but you have not listened to me. You have not listened. So in verse 7, YaHUaH sends an unnamed prophet or Nabi who reminds the people of something that we would have heard from chapter 2 coming down. You know, and he reminds them of what he did for them in the past, and also revealed to them that their oppression was because of disobedience. It wasn't because of the power, the might of the other nations. It was because of their disobedience and joining with these nations to worship other entities, other mighty ones, call on other names, do other things, much like his people are doing today. Going into the various religious systems, joining with them, calling on other names beside the true names, observing other yumim or days to worship outside of what he instructs, going against his Torah, his instructions, and joining with other nations, declaring that his instructions are no longer relevant. They have made his laws of null effect. They have totally made his name null and void by replacing it. Our people are joining just as they did then, they're doing now, and the repercussions and all of the consequences continue on our people today. Across the world, our people continue to experience the consequences of going against the instructions of the Most High. Verses 11 to 13 tells us something interesting happened. The Malak or angel of YaHUaH came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash or Joash the Abizrite, where his son Gideon or Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the Malak of YaHUaH appeared to Gideon or Gideon, he said, YaHUaH is with you, mighty warrior. Gideon replied, pardon me, my master, but if YaHUaH is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, Did not YaHUaH bring us up out of Mitzrayim or out of Egypt? But now YaHUaH has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian. Given us into the hand of Midian. So now the messenger of the Most High appears to Gideon or to Gideon, who was embarrassingly threshing wheat in a wine press. And he was hidden because he didn't want the Midianites to find the little food that he was trying to prepare in this space that was not the best space to thresh wheat. Wheat was usually threshed in a wide open space, sometimes in an open field or on a hill where the wind, breeze could blow away the chaff. And he was down in a wine press where this was not possible, just because he was afraid that the Midianites would come and take away the little food he had threshing wheat. The Malachim, or the Malach, the angel, addressed Gideon as a mighty man of valor. He didn't appear to be so mighty because of course, what we see him doing. But we believe this was, of course, a prophetic declaration over Gideon or Gideon. Of course, Gideon proceeded to ask about, the miracles and the wonders from the stories that they heard from their ancestors. Remember, we're told from chapter 2 that was a different generation that rose up, that didn't remember anything about YaHUaH. They started to worship the Asherahs and the Baals around, worship the lords around them, and call on lords, just like many of our people now. Before we wake up to the truth, call on Lord, which is really Baal. And even though we present this information and this truth to many of our people, most of them decide that what you're saying is garbage because they hold on to the traditions of men. And so, just like Gideon's generation, this generation has forgotten the Most High. And is saying, what about the miracles that we read about, that we heard about? How is it we're not seeing them now? Until now, you have persons who are still saying like Gideon, but I've read about all these miracles and hear these stories in the scriptures. Why am I not seeing them now? Gideon was asking the same kind of question. And his conclusion at that time was that YaHUaH had forsaken his people and given them over to the Midianites. He didn't understand. Even though the prophet would have come earlier to the people, the unnamed prophet, and explained from, of course, YaHUaH to these people that it's your disobedience, you broke my covenant and you joined the other nations in their religious practices. You've joined the others and you're worshipping everything else. And you've forgotten about me. That's why this is happening to you. That's why many of us, a number of us, are not seeing a lot of these miracles. Those who follow the instruction of the Most High YaHUaH, those who have a heart to truly worship him. Some believe on him, but they really don't know. And YaHUaH, of course, provides opportunity for everybody to know who he is and to know the truth of his word. For those who honestly don't know, YaHUaH has his way of reaching them too, but he still barracks them because of the place in which their heart is. But once we come into knowledge of the truth, there's a responsibility. We have to respond. So, of course, the questions were asked, of the Malach by Gideon. Now in verses 14 to 16, YaHUaH turned to him. Of course, we know no man has seen YaHUaH. So this messenger stood representing YaHUaH. Just like in any country, whenever a dignitary can't make it to an event and they send someone on their behalf, that person reads a speech, but the speech is not the representative speech, it is the speech of the dignitary. So it is as though the dignitary themselves was speaking. So this messenger represents YaHUaH speaking. As he speaks on behalf of YaHUaH, YaHUaH is in a sense speaking through this messenger to Gideon. So YaHUaH says to him, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not the one sending you?" Now Gideon responds, and you can tell by his next response that he really doesn't realize who is talking to him. In verse 15 he says, "Pardon me, my master, but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh. I am the least in my family." And YaHUaH answered, "I will be with you. You will strike down all the Midianites and leave none alive." And this, of course, was another prophetic utterance. You leave none alive. Now, Gideon really of himself was a weak man, His belief was weak, We're not sure of his stature, but he sees himself as an insignificant person in his tribe and an insignificant person in his home or in his father's household. So the might that he would go in would really be the strength of the Most High YaHUaH. 2 Corinthians 12:9 tells us that YaHUaH's strength is made perfect in our weakness. So the perfection of YaHUaH's strength would be in Gideon's weakness. So that is the might that he would go in, as the Ruach or spirit of the Most High YaHUaH would come upon him. So even though he saw himself as insignificant, and he made the statement, how can I save Israel? He was right, because the saving of Israel, the rescuing of Israel was not up to Gideon. It was up to YaHUaH through Gideon. So YaHUaH is the one who would rescue his people, but through the hands of Gideon or Gideon. So YaHUaH wanted Gideon to place his confidence not in himself but in YaHUaH. So it was not about self-confidence nor believing in yourself, as are some terminologies used today. Believe in yourself, have self-confidence. What YaHUaH wanted Gideon to have was not self-confidence or believing in himself, but believing in the Most High YaHUaH. Having confidence in the Most High YaHUaH, who would be with him, who would be behind him, who would ensure that the victory was secure. Praise YaHUaH. So of course, he continued the conversations with this messenger. Now in verses 17 to 21, Gideon decides to reply or respond. So he says, "Well, if I found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and place it before you." So we see where he wants to prove that it's really the Most High sending a message to him. Probably he thought this was a prophet speaking on behalf of the Most High. And of course, the response he got was, I will wait until you return. YaHUaH or Gideon went inside, prepared a young goat from an ephah of flour, and an ephah of flour. He made bread without yeast, putting the meat in a basket and its broth in a pot. He brought them out and offered them to the messenger under the oak. And the messenger of YaHUaH said unto him, take the meat and the unleavened bread and place them on the rock. Pour out the broth, and Gideon did so. And the malach of YaHUaH touched the meat and the unleavened bread with the tip of the staff that was in his hand. Fire flared up from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread. And of course, the messenger of the Most High disappeared. So Gideon would have done that which he was instructed to do. He came back with his offering and he put them on the thing, on the rock. The messenger used his staff and touched it, and of course, the fire consumed everything that was on the rock. On the rock. Now, what is interesting, verses 22 to 24, says, when Gideon realized that it was a malach or an angel of YaHUaH, he exclaimed, alas, sovereign, I have seen the malach of YaHUaH face to face. I've seen the messenger and angel of the Most High YaHUaH face to face. So, though he originally was talking, he was not convinced until he saw this miraculous feat. You can imagine how terrified he was when he saw that the fire just started to blaze up from that which he presented. The verses continue. Verse 23, but YaHUaH said to him, Shalom Aleichem Al-Tirah. In other words, peace unto you, do not be afraid. You may hear some others saying Shalom Aleichem, but the words are actually Shalom Aleichem, peace be unto you. So he said to him, Shalom Aleichem Al-Tirah, peace be unto you, do not be afraid. And he continues and says to him, you are not going to die. So YaHUaH or Gideon built an altar to YaHUaH there and called it YaHUaH Shalom, which means YaHUaH is peace. So this shows us that naturally he was terrified, but when he heard the response, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, peace be unto you, peace. Do not be afraid, Al-Tirah. He tells him he's not going to die. Gideon honored YaHUaH by building an altar. And altars are usually built during times of covenant. So he called that covenant or that altar YaHUaH Shalom. YaHUaH Shalom, which means YaHUaH is peace. Now we continue the chapter, verses 25 to 27. That same Leela or night. So we're seeing where the assignment now becomes instant. There's no time to waste. So we're told that same night YaHUaH said to him, take the second bull from your father's herd, the one 7 years old. Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar or a proper covenant to YaHUaH, YaHUaH, on top of this height. Using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down, offer the second bull. So burn the wood under the second bull as a burnt offering. Of course, verse 27 says, Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as YaHUaH told him. But because he was afraid of his family and the townspeople, he did it at Leela, or night, rather than in the yom, or in the day. So these are examples of Asherah poles and altars, and they are not necessarily the exact replica or replicas of what existed in that time, but they are examples of what is referred to as Asherah poles or altars to Baal. So we see that once this covenant was made, YaHUaH Shalom, YaHUaH gave the instruction to Gideon. In a sense, Gideon, get your house in order first. Cut down all the Baals and representations of other mighty ones around you. Offer a burnt offering using the same things that they worship. Burn up everything and establish a new covenant in this place, or a new altar in this place. What we believe, whomever held the covenant, whomever the covenant was dedicated to, or the altar was dedicated to, controlled the territory. So Gideon knew it was important and urgent, and especially after he saw miracles, owning that wine press. But he was still afraid of what might happen to him, because he knows that these were worshipped mighty ones, and his father and the household and the people in the area, in the community, would not be pleased, and surely they would want to kill him. So he did what he did by night, or by Leela, which is the Hebrew word. We're coming down nicely. Verses 28 to 32 says, in the morning, something interesting happened. When the people of the town got up, there was Baal's altar demolished, with the Asherah pole beside it cut down, and the second bull sacrificed on this newly built altar. They asked each other, who did this? When they carefully investigated, they were told, Gideon, or Gideon, son of Joash or Yoash, did it. So it didn't take very long for them to find out who did it. Whatever was done in the dark would have to come out to the light. The truth of YaHUaH cannot be hidden for very long. At some point it has to come out, and all will see and know it. Verse 30 says that the people of the town demanded of Yoash or Joash, bring out your son, carry him out, send him out, man. How is it he would have done this thing? And of course, they declared that he must die because he has broken down Baal's altar, or the Lord's altar, and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Remember, Baal is the Hebrew word for Lord. Of course, Gideon's father gave a very logical response, and can be a lesson for many who worship other mighty ones today. He said to them, this hostile crowd, of course, in verse 31, are you going to plead Baal's cause? Are you trying to save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal or Baal is really a mighty one, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar. Verse 32 says, so because Gideon broke down Baal's altar, they gave him a name, which was like a nickname, Yerubbaal, or Jerubbaal, which means let Baal contend with him, or let Baal strive with him. So he got a nickname because of the fact that he broke down Baal's altar. But in an effort to save his child, his father gave that response. But it was not really his father who saved him. The hand of the Most High YaHUaH was already upon Gideon. No one was able to kill him. Verses 33 to 35 tells us, now all the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples joined forces and crossed over the Jordan, and camped in the valley of Jezreel. Then the Ruach, or Spirit of YaHUaH, came upon Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, summoning the Abizrites to follow him. He sent messengers through Manasseh, calling them to arms, and also to Asher, Zabulon, and Naphtali, so that they too went up to meet them. So the Spirit of the Most High YaHUaH came upon Gideon, much like the same Ruach of the Most High fell upon Yahushua HaMashiach, fell upon those who were in the upper room in Acts chapter 2. The same sevenfold Ruach prophetically described in YaHUaH or Isaiah 11, 1-3. What was described? The verses of YaHUaH 11, 1-3 says, a shoot will come up from the stem of Jesse, from his roots a branch, and that sour will bear fruit. The Spirit of YaHUaH, or the Ruach of YaHUaH, will rest upon him. The Ruach of wisdom, the Ruach or Ruach of understanding, the Ruach of spirit of counsel, the Ruach of might, the Ruach or Ruach of knowledge, and the Ruach of the fear of YaHUaH, or the Spirit of the fear of YaHUaH. So this sevenfold Spirit of the Most High that would have fallen upon Yahushua HaMashiach and later upon those in the upper room in the house, Acts chapter 2, was moving long before that, as we're told in Judges chapter 6, that the Ruach or the Ruach, in English the Spirit of the Most High YaHUaH, was upon Gideon, or came upon him. And of course, he was able to do what he was to do. We're told that he blew the shofar, or the trumpet, when the Spirit of the Most High came upon him, summoning men from various tribes, Manasseh, Naphtali, Asher, these various tribes, were called together. Notice we don't see Yehuda or Judah, because Judah is not the only tribe, as many tend to think or represent. There were 12 tribes. So these other tribes, though they were not necessarily trained men of war, they came together after the summoning by the power of the Spirit of the Most High YaHUaH through the blowing of that trumpet these men came together. Ashar, Zabulun, Naphtali, Manasseh came together with Gideon to go to battle. Of course, Gideon got cold feet. And we must understand this was a life or death experience. He was about to do an assignment that would have been the biggest thing he probably ever did in his life, and something that could have cost him his life if the Most High was not with him. Gideon said to YaHUaH, "If you will save Israel by my hand as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece, and all around the fleece is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand as you have said." And of course, verse 38 says, and that's what happened. In the morning, or the bukar, when he arose, he squeezed the fleece, wrung it out, and it filled a bowl. The water from it filled a bowl. Verse 39, he said again, so you can tell nerves are kicking in. Natural for the nerves to kick in. He says, "Do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece. But this time, make the fleece dry and let the ground be covered with dew." That night YaHUaH did so. Only the fleece was dry. All the ground was covered with dew. Even though YaHUaH had already given Gideon a sign, and Gideon would have already expressed that that sign would have been enough for him, he asked for 2 more signs involving this fleece of wool. Even in the midst of the assembly of people, even though he saw how thousands came at the battle call of the blowing of the trumpet or the shofar, even though he must have felt the power of the Spirit of the Most High that came upon him, he still had some doubts and needed reassurance. This shows, of course, that YaHUaH is merciful, patient, great in pardon to his children, or his called out people, his Kudashim, when our minds are troubled about assignments that we have. It may seem rough now, because it is a great assignment to bring his word without fear, especially in the face of adversity, when family and friends and all around us are rising up against us. No one wants to hear it. People are condemning it. Some calling you various names, saying you're crazy, saying you're in a cult, saying all sorts of things to simply follow the word, when they are following all sorts of traditions of men out there with all these various celebrations and observances that are not in scripture anywhere. Yet they say you are a cult for following the scripture. Satan has deceived the whole world. The challenge that Gideon had was no walkover challenge. A great number of us would not have accepted this particular assignment or mission. Some would not even ask for a sign because they're just not going to take it on. They probably would say nope. And they probably would think maybe it's the enemy trying to tell them to do something for them to die. Even though Gideon's belief was weak, it was better than the absence of belief altogether. Yet even though he may have seemed to have a weak belief, he was named amongst the people of great belief in Hebrews 11 verse 32. And of course, YaHUaH will work with something. Doesn't matter how small it is or perceivably insignificant. Well, we know that a lot of persons want to hear how it ends, and you can continue as you go over into chapter 7. Stick around with us as we will get into what happens in chapter 7 in another video upload. But even ahead of us doing that, we invite you to delve into the scripture. Read how it ends. Read how it progresses. All praises to the Most High YaHUaH. Well, we thank you again for joining us for another presentation. Again, we are the Natsrim of YaHUaH, giving all praise to the Most High YaHUaH, delving into His Word, and just basking in the vast amount of knowledge about the history of our ancestors and our people, and the many barakim or blessings that are there for the chosen, called out people of the Most High YaHUaH. Do not fear. Do not be afraid. Peace be unto you. Shalum Alikam Altira. Peace be unto you. Do not be afraid. YaHUaH is with us, and we should not be afraid of what man wants to say or do to us. Thank you so much for joining. Tuda Rabba for joining. And we say Achad, ahabah, one love. Do remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so that you can be notified of any video upload